As you heard, my name is Brian Childress, and I am from a small suburb of DC known as Richmond, Virginia. I've been there for a few years with my family now, and really enjoying the tech scene there and up here in DC. Now, I work as a fractional CTO and technical advisor, which is basically just a very confusing title to say that I have the opportunity to work with a number of different companies, startups and scale-ups, helping them to grow and scale not only their platforms, but their teams as well. Now, my goal for this talk is that I can share some insights as an engineering leader, and hopefully folks that are not leaders, but are individual contributors, are able to take some valuable information away as well. So now I've had the opportunity to work in a distributed environment or in a remote team for pretty much my entire tech career. A quick kind of map of these are a lot of the places where I've worked with other team members, other engineers. So I've really found a lot of benefit in working in this way, but there are certainly a lot of challenges when you're working with people really spread across the globe. Who here has worked in a distributed or a remote environment, a remote team before, say, maybe like early 2020? Has anyone ever done that? Yeah. So the COVID pandemic really thrust a lot of folks right into remote work. And there's a lot going on at that time, right? A lot to try and figure out. Companies weren't quite sure how to go about working remotely. And I think one of the challenges that I see a lot is we try and shift the way that we work in an office with others to do the same thing remotely. So we have the same meetings, we have the same expectations for speed of communication. And unfortunately, in a distributed or a remote environment, that can be very, very taxing for us trying to get our work done. Well, why do we go with distributed? What are some of the benefits of it? So for one, I think we now have access to global talent. We're no longer restricted to trying to find talent just in our region, folks that can commute to the same office. We can now look in other states, other time zones, and completely different countries. And this has been a really, really big benefit because now we have access to experience and expertise that we haven't had before. One of the other things that we hear a lot around the benefits of working in a remote or a distributed environment is that we have access to cheap labor. And I really don't like thinking of it that way, but I do think that we do have not only access to great talent, but folks that live in lower cost of living countries. This is really, really beneficial because now we can pay for fantastic talent, and folks in those other countries are able to make a really, really solid wage. And then finally, I think that one of the biggest benefits in really adopting a distributed culture is that now we are able to actually create time because we have access to more time zones. So way back in the day, we used to call this the follow the sun model, where we would have different teams in different regions of the world. They would start their day normally, and then there would be project handoffs throughout the day so that really we were able to work on a project for effectively all 24 hours of the day, pushing things forward. And I think there's a lot of benefits to this. Certainly doesn't come without its challenges. Now, real quick, does it feel like time zones and understanding time zones and getting time zones right feels exactly like trying to catch a rocket out of midair? Yeah. Super confusing. It's very, very difficult. So when I think about how do we work within the different time zones, how do we take the benefits of them without adding additional confusion, I think it's important to establish, hey, what is the time zone that we're talking about now? If we have to have a synchronous meeting, let's make sure that we're all on the same page for which time zone that we're actually in and what are we talking about. Has anyone ever shown up late to a meeting because of the time zone? Maybe early, maybe not at all. Yeah, it's a big challenge, and it's something that, it's a very small thing, but as you're scheduling, as you're talking about it, it's important to just say, hey, we're going to meet in Eastern Standard Time. This is our time, and then everybody can kind of calculate from there. Anyone in here doing hiring right now? Anyone trying to find great talent anywhere, locally, remotely? Just me? Okay. So hiring is a big, big challenge, right? It's challenging not only if we're hiring somebody who we can see face to face, shake their hand in person, but hiring in a remote environment is even more difficult. So there's quite a few stories that I can share about the different things that people are trying to do as they're applying for these remote opportunities. There are a lot of fake profiles that are being created, a lot of fake applications. We're seeing folks pretending to live in Gainesville, Florida, and when you start to talk to them in the interview, you realize they have no idea where Gainesville, Florida is or anything about it. But they are really trying their best to try and circumvent a lot of the interview process so that they can get into the organization, make a really good wage, and really it's really, really challenging. So one of the ways that I like to go about my hiring is what I call a test-first hiring approach. So we can do a lot of technical challenges and deep dive interviews and panel interviews, but at the end of the day, it's really hard for us to really know, is this candidate somebody who we want to work with, who actually has the skills and not is just great at interviewing. So when I think about test-first hiring, I'll put together a very small project, a very small or a short contract where we have an opportunity to now work together on it so that we can see, hey, is this person somebody that I actually want to work with day in and day out in this role? Is this person somebody that can do a great job at communicating, at collaborating? Do they actually produce high quality code if we're building software together? This is a really great way that we can reduce the risk of hiring somebody and increase the speed at which we can bring them on and start to really evaluate how do they fit within our organization. There are a ton of job boards out there where we can post a lot of the jobs that we're trying to hire for, and there are a lot of bad applications that come in. Like I mentioned, I'm seeing a lot of fake applicants coming in. So one thing that I prefer to do is to identify, hey, these are the roles that we're looking for, and then starting to do outreach. Again, now that I'm able to look outside of the bounds of, say, Richmond or outside of DC, I can now look more globally. I now have access to a bigger talent pool, but I like to reach out to folks that may not actively be looking for a new opportunity, but may be a great fit for some of the roles that I have. So some of the ways I do that personally is just using tools like LinkedIn and some of the other platforms that have already aggregated information about individual candidates. One of the big things that we need to do when we're in a distributed environment especially is, how do we build trust, right? I'm no longer sitting next to the person that I'm working with. We're no longer on the same floor or in the same building, or heck, most of the time we're not even in the same state. So how do we build trust within our organization so that we can effectively work as a team? One of the things that I really like to do is, I have the benefit of working on a number of different teams with folks spread all over the world, from Lebanon, Ukraine, Poland, Uruguay, Arizona. There are a lot of great folks, and they have all different cultures. They have all different experiences and areas of expertise. So one of the things that I really like to do is to understand who they are and what their background is. What are some of the things that are important to them or unique to their culture? What are some of the holidays that they celebrate? Now, not necessarily every person in that particular country is going to celebrate the same holidays, but it's a really good way to start to build that connection, to build that understanding, because I'm interested in learning about who they are and what they think is important. Now, for a lot of the folks that I work with, English isn't their first or their second language. Typically, English might be their third or their fourth language. I'm fortunate to work with a lot of very smart people. And so for me, as a way to try and build trust and build connection with the folks that I'm working with, I'll try and learn some basic terms in their native language. Good morning, thank you, please. different ways that I can try and practice my Southern dialect of some of these languages can really start to bring some of that connection together. And thankfully, they're very understanding, and they will help me to make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly and not offending anyone. But I have found that that's a really good way for us to start to build a connection. So no matter where we're working, whether we're in person or remote, but especially in a remote environment where we're not sure what's going on, kind of where we fit within an organization, we're at home in our home office and feeling very disconnected, what I found is true is that everyone wants to know a few different things. They want to know, hey, how am I doing right now? How is my work being perceived? Am I communicating well enough? Are there areas that I can improve? What are the things that are important that I can make sure that I, as an individual contributor, can be focusing on? People also want to know, hey, what should I be working on? Because it's very easy for us as leaders to kind of forget about people. Like, oh no, I haven't talked to Kenny or Sally in a few days. How are they doing? How are they progressing? If there's not a culture of continuous outreach to make sure that someone is doing okay, we might forget about them, and they may be working on something that is actually no longer a priority for the organization. And then finally, I think one of the biggest things that we all like to know, whether we're an individual contributor or a leader in an organization, is what role does my work actually play in the bigger picture? And I find this to be really important to help illustrate for engineers. When we're building a new form and we just have the same basic form fields, what role does this actually play in the organization? Why does it matter that I'm creating this thing? Because it feels so small and so insignificant in the moment. How do I know that the work that I'm doing is actually important and actually driving us forward? So as a leader, I think it's important for me to make sure that I know, hey, how does everyone know what's going on in the company and where we're heading? Again, because we're not sitting next to each other, we're not going to lunch and grabbing coffee together the same way we did in an office environment, it's easy to lose sight of those things. We feel completely disconnected. And so it's important for us to always continuously be reiterating, where is the company going and what role does my work play in that? Who here is doing regular one-on-ones, either with their manager or with their direct reports? Yeah. I think this is one of the most powerful things that in my career I wish I had more of these as I was coming up through the ranks. I wish that my managers really would sit down with me and have regular one-on-ones where we could talk about my career growth, the role that I played in the organization, and how it was that I would be able to contribute and to continue to grow. Now for me, one-on-ones are a very important space, and I make sure that these are top priority for me and the team. So I want to make sure that I'm never going to cancel a one-on-one, and I'm rarely going to move a one-on-one. I schedule around them because I want to protect that time because I do think that it is so important. Now I like to tell my team that one-on-ones aren't necessarily for work talk, right? That's not where we're going to be doing status updates. That's not where we're going to be doing project planning or necessarily diving into deep technical topics. There are other meetings, there are other opportunities for us to collaborate on this. A one-on-one is the opportunity for me as a leader to make sure that the folks on my team feel supported, that they have a place to bring issues to me, that we can talk about their career growth and making sure that I'm doing my best to support them in that growth. Now, one-on-ones are, for me, a place to give and receive feedback. Now, the way that I structure my one-on-ones is, once we kind of talk through our agenda items, I ask for, hey, what feedback do you have for me as a leader? And I sit back and I listen. And the only response I have is thank you. because I want them to feel like they have the opportunity to really share what is on their mind and what feedback they have for me, so that I am doing my best to support them as their leader. Now, I also think that one-on-ones are important for giving feedback. And every single one-on-one, I make sure that I give feedback to the person on my team. Every single time. I don't think that there's value in a one-on-one without giving feedback and growth opportunities. Now, one of the ways that I kind of manage this is I have 2 documents that I use. So every member on my teams will have a shared document, right? Like a Google Doc, and that I'll share with them. And that's their place to put agenda items. So the way that I structure it is at the very top, I have their personal and their professional goals that they've shared with me. I'll ask them, in 5 years, we can't work together. What are the goals that you have? Because I want to make sure that the work that we're doing down in the trenches every day is in some way pushing and driving towards some of those goals, both personal and professional. From there, we just have a simple agenda item, and this is a place for either one of us to drop some bullet points on the document that we can make sure we're hitting those topics. Again, this is my direct reports. This is their place to put those items. They own the agenda. I'm only there to support them. Now, the second document that I have is just internal for me. So anytime that I see a conversation happening in Slack, or someone responding in a meeting or not responding in a meeting, or some sort of thing that it feels a little nitpicky, it feels like, maybe this isn't super important to bring up immediately, but it is something that I want to bring to their attention that I can provide coaching on, I put that into a feedback document. So as soon as the person that I'm working with gives me their feedback, I'll pull from this document the feedback that I have for them, based on what I think is important for their continued growth. Do you guys remember a few minutes ago, hopefully you do, when I asked you to kind of move around in your chair? Most of you were really pretty worried that we were going to have some other weird icebreaker coming right behind it. Yeah. So I did that for a reason. One, to try and liven up the room, get everybody awake. But it's also because if you think about it, did anyone do the same movement or have the same reaction as their neighbor? No. You all got the same information. You had the same request from me, but you didn't do the same thing. You interpreted it slightly differently. And one of the biggest things that I think is important for us to consider and keep in mind when working in a distributed or in a remote environment is around our communication, right? I asked you one time, everyone had a different interpretation of that request, but maybe I didn't get out of it what I was looking for. Maybe the way that you interpret that information is different and I need to reiterate it or change the way I deliver it. So I think communication is really, really important for us. Again, because I can't turn around to the person I'm working with and say, hey, Johnny, and ask a question. So a couple things that I found work really, really well is to have a culture of open communication and open collaboration. This is where we have shared documents that everyone has access to, that everyone can edit and collaborate on, leave comments on. This is really, really helpful so that everyone is aware and everyone is part of the conversation. They're able to get up to speed in their time, not necessarily the same time as me. I also really, really promote that we don't have a lot of collaboration in our direct messages, in our DMs. They just get lost to the sands of time, right? If someone leaves the organization, so does all of that information, and that conversation completely goes away. So I really encourage us to have things like project-based Slack channels or different ways that we can collaborate more in public, in the open, so that we are all aware of kind of what's going on, what information is there. Now, when we're working in this type of environment, one of the biggest differences that I've found going from kind of the way that we always worked in like an office environment to now is that we used to just say, send a quick message, hey, how's it going? And then we would wait for that back and forth. So what would happen is I would send a message and then wait for that other person to see it and reply. So we always felt like we had to be watching Slack all the time or watching our email all the time. And that can be really, really challenging. We're constantly switching contexts. We're not fully paying attention. One of the things that I think is really important for us to give engineers and folks the space to be able to create is to give them all of the information that they need in order for them to do their work, to answer the questions that I have, so that they can do it in a time that's appropriate for them, so that they're not waiting for me to reply to give additional information. I want to give everything to them all at once. Because, again, not everyone's going to be working at the same time. So let's make sure that they have the information that when they're online, when they're working, that they're able to progress and move forward. Tools. We all said we struggled with time zones, right? One of the tools that I found to be really, really helpful is this website, just worldtimebuddy.com. Very, very simple. Basically, you can put in the different time zones that you're trying to figure out and then find the time that aligns. So you don't have to sit here and do the weird translations, especially when you're dealing with like folks in Europe or Latin America or something. Time zones get super weird, and I try not to figure that out anymore. I used to think this was a superpower. Who here is using Loom or some other like recorded video to like have async collaboration? Yeah? This has been a really, really powerful tool for me over the last few years, because now I can record a quick video where I'm sharing my screen, I'm walking through something that I'm thinking about, and then I'm posting it out there for the rest of the team to consume. Right? I use this a lot for code reviews or architectural changes that I'm thinking about so that I can then get feedback from it. And what I find with recorded video like this is, one, it's a heck of a lot easier for me to communicate what I'm thinking, and it brings that human connection, that feeling like, oh, we're actually part of a team and I'm not just on the other side of a Slack message. I'm actually feeling like I'm part of something. Now, Loom is a great one. Slack has also added a lot of very similar features recently, if you've seen them. So some of my teams really love to use things like audio messages. Just send a quick 50-second, hey, this is what I'm thinking message. Again, it gives us that human connection. It's easier for us to actually have that communication versus, I don't really want to write this long paragraph to try and explain this, so I'm just not going to. I've found this to be really helpful, and Slack can do video as well, so just very short recorded videos have been really, really helpful. So we've got to track progress somehow. It doesn't matter whether we're in the office or completely spread across the globe. We've got to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So one of the things that I like to say when we're tracking progress is, let's pick one tool that we use for project management, for task management. You'll see like, oh, well, we put our bug reports in this Slack channel, and this team over here is using a Google spreadsheet. And for our engineering work, we have this Kanban board. And that just gets really confusing because you don't know where to look. And being in a distributed environment, you don't necessarily want to go and ask somebody again, where the heck do I go and find this thing? So you don't ask, and you struggle, and you spend time, and you waste cycles trying to find the information that you need. So pick one tool and just go with that and drive all conversations and all communication and collaboration back to that point. One of the other things that I've found to be really, really helpful is this idea of an end-of-day report. Basically, the way that I structure these on one of my teams is that we have a shared private Slack channel between me and the direct report. And we might add a few other people in, kind of depending on who should be aware of the information. And this is basically like, think of it like your end-of-day stand-up, right? These are the things that I worked on. These are the blockers that I have, the challenges or the questions that I have. And then these are the needs that I might have. And then so me as a leader, I can go in and review that, make sure that we're continuing to move in the right direction, that we're making progress. And then if there is a blocker, let me make sure that I can remove that. And I found this to be a really good way to share that information and for us to not lose kind of track of what's going on if somebody needs something. Really quick, because I think we are right at time, just to quickly recap, being in a distributed remote environment, hopefully many of us have felt it over the last few years, but there are a lot of benefits that we can bring from it. Super important for us to build and to maintain trust. Because we're not sitting next to the same people that we're working with, it's really, really difficult to kind of know where we stand and to feel like we can trust the company or the environment or the team that we're on. Communication is absolutely key. This is one of the biggest things that I look for when I'm hiring and when I'm growing my teams is how well does this person communicate? Can they communicate? Can they collaborate well? There are a lot of fantastic tools out there. The Otter and Fathom and Loom are great ways to record kind of what's going on so you can get AI summaries of meetings. There are a lot of really, really good tools out there, so I would encourage you to kind of play around with them and find the ones that work for you, your team, and your workflow. And finally, I think it's really important for us to track and also celebrate progress. Right? We can all feel like we're just throwing more work into the proverbial pile. It's important for us to celebrate those small wins and really, really make a big deal about it so that we can continue to promote and bring everyone together even if we're not physically in the same location.